Welcome everyone to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. I'm a networking expert and the author of the upcoming book, No Strangers, How to Build Community, One Relationship at a Time. My why is the pursuit of mastery, and the goal of this podcast is to lock arms on a lifelong mission of daily personal growth to become the best version of ourselves. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. We are joined by a very special guest. He is a two-time Juno Award-winning recording and mixing engineer. So welcome to the podcast, my good friend, Mr. Kevin Dietz. Kevin, how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I am awesome. So I've been pleasantly persistent, as our mutual friend Jim Norris, marketing guru, likes to say. You got to be pleasantly persistent
Yes.
to get you on the podcast. It's been about 8 months. You're a super busy man.
Yeah.
And 2022 is the year that dreams come true. We got you here today, and I'm very excited. Yeah. So
thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm so excited to sit down with you as a friend, as a music lover, as an audio engineer. I know that our audience, they love music and they love the deep dives of what goes on in the studios. They're fans of a lot of the bands you've worked with, so they want to hear if there's any behind the scenes stories, anything cool about the songs and albums that they love. And I guess to share our history so people know how we know each other, we both worked at Metalworks for over 7 years. I was there about 7. You were there 7.5 or more. And for those that aren't familiar, Metalworks is one of the top entertainment companies in Canada, a recording studio that goes back 40 years, a live event production company, a college where people can learn those types of things: engineering, producing, mixing, live events, business, all that stuff. And we were there for 7+ years. We've both been gone now, doing other things for 5 or 7 years. And also 9 years ago, you recorded my last album. I have not recorded an album in 9 years. So that was the tipping point.
That's right.
And the final thing that I would like to say is, leading up to recording that album 9 years ago, I bought my first MacBook because I thought, okay, there's going to be a lot of audio files, a lot of editing. I should have a good, solid computer. And what's funny is today, I am on a brand new MacBook that just came out. So my MacBook that I got with you lasted 9 years. I still, up to yesterday, use it every day, hours a day. And I'm on you're the first guest on this new MacBook. And I guess what I'm trying to say is you inspire me to constantly upgrade myself and be a better version of myself. Either that, or you inspire me to get a new MacBook every decade or so. So
thank you for your service, old MacBook.
There you go. Rest in peace. So what I'd like to do is start with a very special guest comment. So I have a comment that has been sent in that I would like to read to you to get started. This is going to tie everything together. So this comes to us from Mr. Gil Moore. So this is the drummer and singer from Triumph. These guys have sold like 40 million albums, and he's the owner of Metalworks that we just talked about. So this is what Gil Moore has to say about one Kevin Dietz. He says, Kevin is one of the very best engineers and producers out there. At Metalworks, we're extremely proud of him, and he deserves the success he's achieved. He's one of the hardest working guys I've seen in the field. And on top of that, and most importantly, he's a solid citizen and all around nice guy. So that's Gil Moore from Triumph. How does that make you feel on a Sunday morning?
Well, I'll say thank you, Gil, for that. If he ends up checking out this episode, that's some very kind words. Like you mentioned. Well, I went to school at Metalworks, and I ended up working there for 7.5 years, and continued to do a lot of work for years after that there. So Metalworks is a big part of my my story, how I got my start in everything related to this. So that's quite quite a huge compliment to hear words like that, and I'm grateful to I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome. So let's start by breaking down the various roles that people play in the studio. So again, our listeners love music. They're
Yeah,
listening to music, they're going to live concerts, but they're not sure exactly who does what in the studio. So
yeah.
I guess we could just quickly break it down to what is an assistant engineer, an engineer, a producer, the mixing engineer, and then the mastering engineer. Maybe those five
Ooh,
just quickly, you don't
yeah.
have to go super in depth. This isn't a master class or whatever.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
But just if you can go through them and people will go, oh, okay, that's what people are up to back there.
Well, yeah. Generally, when you start out, an entry level position at a recording studio would be an assistant, or oftentimes they can be two different positions, but it's often referred to as a runner, and that's basically just someone who does the basic assistant duties. Very little technical demand in that position. The runner is basically like the gopher, kind of handling the chores, getting people's food, any little things that they need that would take away from the like the technical work being done. And that's often kind of like blurred with assistant engineer. They're often like synonymous, and sometimes you do both. But the assistant essentially, well, it's like the title says, you assist the session. So outside engineers and producers will come in, and you're the house person at the studio who knows the room, knows where all the cables are kept, which microphones are around, where all the stands are, and the producer and engineer will direct you for what they want on a session and what they want the setup to be, and you will do that. You'll be their right-hand individual to take care of all that. So it's actually it's a demanding job because you're constantly on your toes with different people and different personalities. You often have to juggle a number of things at the same time. Oh, we want to set up for this. This person's coming in at this time. We also need to order lunch. Can you also talk to the studio manager to see if we can get this for tomorrow? So you have to be organized, pay attention, attentive, and anticipate the needs of the client ahead of time. You sort of want to be very proactive in that in that position, and you're also the first one in and the last one out.
I was just going to
On a
ask,
day.
would the assistant get there long before everyone else and set up mics and set up things generally to save
Yeah,
time, because time is money, and at a big studio it costs a lot per hour.
yeah. I mean, it varies depending on the session, how far in advance you have to come in, and how late you'll be staying after. But absolutely, one thing that's guaranteed is you're the first one in and the last one out.
And the assistant engineer position is important for someone new, because if the engineer, the producer, the record label, if they can't trust you as the assistant engineer to remember things and to be reliable, to show up on time, you're never going to progress to the other positions as well. So it seems like,
Absolutely.
oh, I'm at the start of this. How do I work my way up? But it's actually a very important position, and it helps to save time and make the sessions run smoothly.
Yeah, if the assistant engineer is doing their job and doing it well, then the session is very transparent and runs extremely smoothly. If they're not, it can be a disaster. So it's one of the most important positions in the studio, definitely.
Hmm. So then after that, we have the engineer, and that's more the technical side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty smooth transition between the two, to be honest. It's basically when you become a staff engineer, um, you're an assistant engineer that just has years of experience, where now you're able to kind of get in the driver's seat, if you will. So you you spend all this time assisting people and learning the ropes and going, oh, okay, and just observing. I did mention that it's there's a fair amount of responsibility with the position, but they're also in many ways, you get to learn without like the burden of everything being on your shoulders. So
That's
it's
kind of
kind of
nice,
a
actually.
yeah. Once you get everything set up and you're doing your job, I mean, if the engineer on the session, like the dedicated engineer or producer, whoever on the session, they're mainly responsible to the band. So once you take care of your thing on your side, you sort of get to just maintain everything and just make sure everything is running smoothly, and learn from the individuals that you're working with. So oftentimes you're really busy at the beginning of the session, busy throughout with little things, busy at the end because you've got to tear everything down and back everything up and put everything away. But there's long periods of time where you're just on standby, ready for any little changes that have to happen. But the bulk of the work is done. So at that point, you get to just sit back and observe and learn. And that's the key. You have to put in a lot of time to get that experience, but you do that. That's what someone in my position does, and then you become a full-fledged engineer. And one day they go, oh, now someone's coming in on the weekend. Okay, you're going to do that session, just you, and you do that. You go from there.
Can you remember the first time that you were officially the engineer, where they said, actually, you are the engineer and there's going to be an assistant coming in to help you? Can you remember that at all, that transition moment?
I don't remember exactly like when it would be you're the engineer and there's an assistant coming to help you. But I do remember in summer of 2008, I was the assistant on Placebo. The band from the UK came to Metalworks for, it was like 9 weeks, all of July, all of August, and a week in September. And they were doing an album called Battle for the Sun. And I was the assistant. There was a dedicated engineer, a dedicated producer, and I was the assistant. It was a great session, huge learning opportunity. And it was running Monday to Friday, and the occasional Saturday, but it was mostly just Monday to Friday. And someone came in on the weekend, and you remember Metalworks Studio 2? It was two guys came in. They were doing like some acoustic guitar and cajon and vocals and whatever. And it was me. I just came in by myself on the weekend and did the thing with those guys. I remember that being one of the I may have done like a vocal with someone before or whatever, but that one I remember. And then further down the line, there would be the opportunity for, on bigger sessions, someone would come in, an intern or whoever, and they would be my assistant.
So then the engineer is doing more of the technical stuff, where they're the hands-on on the computer with Pro Tools or whatever software they're using. They're making sure that the sound that they're getting from the mics are what they want. So it's more the technical of the audio. And then after that, the producer is more a specific sound that they're looking for. Is that?
Well, yeah. Again, it's kind of like a blurry line, because especially in this day and age, you often end up producing, engineering, mixing. It's all, a lot of it is all very blurry these days. But essentially, yeah, your primary job as a recording engineer is to make sure that things are technically correct. But also when the producer says, yeah, we really want to go for this kind of a sound, it's generally the engineer that then goes, okay, so we'll use these kind of microphones. Why don't we set up like this? And why don't we do a thing like this? And so the job of an audio engineer is really to use in my opinion, the job is to use the gear and all the, your technical know-how to be a conduit to capture the artistic intent of the artist, the producer, and so on.
Now, for the producer, a lot of times there's these amazing producers that have a track record of success. So a major label that's spending $1 million on a new artist that that they have an investment, they want to ensure that they make their money back. They find producers that have worked with, that have produced all these platinum artists. So there's a track record of, okay, well, we bring this guy in, he knows how to get the best out of a band. He knows what sells and what doesn't. And he's our best bet, our best guarantee to get a product that's marketable and we can recoup our money and make a profit. What would you say are the roles of a producer when it comes to music in the studio? And there are different kinds of producers, and we can go over that as well.
Well, that's right. There are different kinds of producers. It's basically, I don't know. I liken it to a producer is a lot like the director of a film is how I see it. They're kind of like the high level, pay attention to everything. Oftentimes the producer is responsible for the budget of the entire thing. So they have to oversee the studio costs and any incidentals and hiring other musicians and gear rental or whatever the case may be.
The scheduling of the studio time and...
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, all of that. So there is just a purely organizational aspect to being a producer. And then there's an artistic aspect, which is a big range as well. You can be, I guess ultimately your job is to make tangible the vision of the artist and make their songs the best they can be in recorded form. But also a lot of producers are very hands-on and they'll dig into the music itself. Some producers are less so, and there's a middle ground there too. So it really runs the gamut of like you yourself said, there's like a range of producers and their different styles and how they do all that. So it's a big and then of course, and then if we're talking about hip hop, the term producer means something different. The producer is often like the beat maker in hip hop, the person who
like actually creates
exactly. Yeah. The person who actually like creates the music that the artist then raps over or collaborates with to then do their thing. So, there are producers that are also songwriters. So they will also, Max Martin would be an example of that. So it really, it's a really broad range.
And an example of a very hands-off kind of Zen producer would be Rick Rubin, one of the greatest of all time. Yeah. He's more like he's just in there feeling the vibes and somehow knows what to say and what to do to get the artist back into the place they were when they were making their best music. Or it's like he drops in a suggestion like, oh, what do you think if, and then it gets the band thinking differently and they go in. Would he be the best example of a very hands-off, like he's just in the room lying on a couch? And I'm probably generalizing.
I think so.
But yeah.
No, I think so. From everything I've heard, those accounts are fairly true, but obviously it's some people don't like it. I don't know, in an interview, I remember seeing a clip of Corey Taylor from Slipknot saying, he's like, that's not what I consider a producer, what they're supposed to be doing. And I guess they did something with Rick Rubin, and that's where that
I think came their third album, Volume 3, the Sublime. What's funny, I just bought Slipknot tickets and I just listened to the entire discography. So I think it was album number 3. So now album number 1 and 2 were like insanity, like song structures all over the place. Yeah. So no harmonies, like just chaos. And then Volume 3 is where they start to have those hit singles with big choruses and structures and melodies and acoustic guitars. And that was the Rick Rubin coming in and less critically acclaimed, that album, than a lot of the ones before it and afterwards. And maybe that's
such a good album, though.
Yeah, that's my favorite Slipknot songs come from their least critically acclaimed albums. So I don't like those albums the most as a whole, but the singles themselves are the strongest on the ones that are less critically acclaimed. So whatever that
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Rick Rubin also, again, from what I understand, he definitely, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but he relies on, if you look at the lineage of all these amazing engineers and producers that have come from the Rick Rubin camp, um, Dave Schiffman, Sylvia Massey, Ryan Hewitt, Andrew Sheps, on and on. Rick Rubin always employs excellent recording engineers. And so there's Paul Gross, the former studio manager of Metalworks and former owner of Phase One Studios, legend. He was the manager while for most of the time while I was there at Metalworks before he retired. And he once said to me, he said the way to get a great sound, a great recording is hire great people, work with great musicians, great artists. If you want to sound better, work with better people. And he meant obviously musically, yeah, or technically or whatever. And he was absolutely right. So, I think Rick Rubin knows this. And he goes, well, I'm going to, hire, who's the best engineer in LA right now? I'll hire them. And, so
that allows him the freedom.
That's an ace in up his sleeve. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. It allows him the freedom to be the Zen guru and just focus on the music and, focus on the artistic aspects of it, and that's what he contributes to the band. So I know a lot of people are critical of his style, but how can you argue with his with his thing? He worked with everyone from the Dixie Chicks to Johnny Cash to
Slayer,
Tom Petty to Slayer
Peppers,
to Slipknot, System of a Down, Chili Peppers. You can't really Danzig. You can't argue with that. So, I dig it. He's a very interesting character, and I'm always interested in what he's up to.
So before we dive into what mixing is and what mastering is, to wrap up this kind of intro, what do you think are the qualities that someone like a Rick Rubin has, where regardless of genre, regardless of artist or band, and this, again, he's spanning everything from country to hip hop to metal. He's got, your Jay-Z's and your Beastie Boys and like all these. Yeah. So what do you think it is? It's just his understanding of music as a whole. Like how can someone be so great without being specific to just, they're great at metal or great at country?
Well, I mean, good music is good music, right? And we see this now more than ever. Do you remember a time being a young kid or a teenager or whatever when you kind of had to like pick a type of music that you liked, and if you were a rock guy, you weren't supposed to like hip hop, and if you were into metal, you couldn't you couldn't go to what was the Lilith Fair or something like that, or whatever. You
can't wear your Taylor Swift shirt at the Metallica show.
Yeah, you can't like both. It's kind of like pick a side. And that I remember noticing a change in that trend where I had all these friends in metal bands out in Hamilton, and they were like, oh man, I can't wait for OVO Fest, and they went every year, and I love that kind of mentality. People, good music is good music, and you can debate, you could debate the merits of pop music versus I don't know, something else, some folky singer-songwriter who is who has very deep lyrics and very emotional, versus someone who's just making like basically a party track. But if it sounds good and if it gets you going, if it gives you a reaction in one way or another, then who's to say, right? So good music is good music, and I think now more than ever, especially with genres blending and people really stretching out in that regard. I think more than ever, people are open to so many different types of music. So Now, obviously, that was Rick Rubin way back. So I think he's just one of these people that's a music lover, and maybe he just has an ear for talent. You know, when he was doing LL Cool J back in the day, he was like, this guy is amazing, and he just hears someone who's amazing, and the talent gets him excited. I'm just hypothesizing, but I would imagine that's the case. And or Beastie Boys, and then he hears Slayer and he goes, these guys are ferocious. I can get behind this, because he sees someone excelling at their thing, right? And that's the beauty of it.
I'm always saying that the good music is good music. So, for example, I wouldn't say that, country is my favorite genre, but there have been some years where just my favorite albums of the year were from country artists. Like you had your Zach
Sure.
Brown bands and your Rascal Flats and Keith
Keith
Urban's
Urban.
and yeah,
Keith Urban.
you have
Fantastic.
these country artists, Chris Stapleton. You got these
Oh,
amazing
yeah.
guys and girls, and I always break it down to, if you took any of those albums, say a Chris Stapleton album, and you stripped it down to just guitar and vocals, the essence of the song, and then you had like Metallica cover that album, but as Metallica, it would be a great album. And if you had, I don't know, the Black Album from Metallica, and it was played completely by Chris Stapleton, it would be amazing. So to me, great music is great music regardless of genre, but we do sometimes have preferences where I gravitate towards acoustic singer-songwriters, alternative rock, metal, and less say jazz and less say country or whatever. So we do have our kind of, go-tos from growing up, maybe.
Oh, of course. And there's, nothing wrong with that. Your preferences are going to be your preferences, but it's I think a true fan of music is going to be open to music as a whole. It's just so out of step these days to bash on music. Like it's almost cringy when you hear someone go, "Oh." I remember seeing an article circulating, and people were posting on a Facebook about, it was like the man who ruined music, and it was about Max Martin, and I thought, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Like there's no. I thought that was just I just thought it was ignorant, and I'm like, you may not like the music he makes, but are you gonna deny its impact? And I mean, the funny thing is, he comes from a metal background, and Shellback, his prodigy, the young guy that he's been working with for years, again comes from like a hardcore background. So they're doing, they're producing all this pop stuff together, and then Shellback goes and produces, I think, a few tracks off of, I don't know if the whole thing, but Refuse, their like comeback album.
Wow.
So I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. And I've actually worked with a few producers who have like a metal background, and they do pop stuff like nobody's business. So there might be something there, which or maybe it's just people that are very open, just very open to music. Whatever it is, I'm into it. So I don't dig on the musical snobbery. I was there at one point when I was younger. If there was a point in time when, if it wasn't old school like hardcore punk rock or industrial music, I didn't want to hear about it. And years later, I discovered albums from that time that I wasn't interested in, because all I wanted to listen to was Misfits and Skinny Puppy. And I look back and I go, oops, I missed that album. And now, albums that I love now, that I was like, oh, I just refused to pay attention because it had horns in it or something, and I only wanted distortion on everything at that time.
Do you think maybe what it is for those that have been in metal bands that have gone on to do great pop stuff, do you think it's that with metal, they found a way, despite not having hooks and not having certain things, to make great albums and great songs. And it's like they get a whole new bag of tools where they're not pigeonholed into this one corner. You got to work with just this if you're truly metal. Maybe they feel this freedom of using every trick of the trade, every tool in the toolbox. Do you think that has anything to do with the metal to everything else?
It could be. It really
Let
it
us
really
speculate.
Let us speculate. It very well could be. Although, all my favorite metal from back in the day definitely has hooks. I would say if I had to pick a favorite metal album of all time, I'd go with Master of Puppets. And there's hooks all over that thing. Even Slayer, which is like, melodically is very monotone. The hooks are in the guitar riffs and everything. So there are still hooks in there. And now modern metal, things like Slipknot or Killswitch Engage or, on and on and on. That stuff is like so hooky. There's tons of stuff in there. And so who knows? Let us speculate.
That's why we're here, just to speculate. So, so we rented a recording studio between the assistant engineer, the engineer, and the producer. We have all the instruments recorded. We got the perfect takes from all the musicians. So we just have all these audio files. Now, What do we do as the mixing engineer, which is a lot of times the engineer or the producer? What is mixing when it comes to the session? What does that do?
Well, yeah, mixing is taking all of those individual pieces, those individual tracks per song, and making them into one cohesive. You got to go with the technical term, just with one audio file. That is like, that's the thing that people will listen to. You've got a left channel and a right channel, and that's it. So you take, any number of tracks, 24, 48, 100, 150, who knows. You've got a track for every microphone, that's on the drum kit. You've got multiple vocal tracks, guitar tracks, all this stuff, overdubs. And the mixing engineer balances all that out, adds EQ and compression and effects, and really like forms the final vision of the song into a tangible audio file that goes out to the consumer after the mastering engineer puts that final polish on it.
So when the mixing is done, we have, say, 10 individual songs that each song sounds perfect. We've captured the vision of the musicians, the producer, everything. We have just 10 separate songs as audio files. Now it all has to sound like one product. So we get that to the mastering engineer. And what specifically does the mastering engineer do to gloss it up at the end?
Well, the mastering engineer will take all of those tracks. The producer, the artist, will let them know like what the sequence of it is. The mastering engineer will use.
So they're putting the songs in order of how it plays when you put in a CD.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Even if you think about if you think about it in terms of digital delivery, streaming, or purchasing MP3s or waves or whatever, they will. They'll put them in order and determine the space in between songs. Some songs, mold right into each other. So where does one end and the other begin in terms of a file or a, kind of like a marker point on your iTunes or whatever. So it's a very technical process, but it's also an artistic process. In that they just do the final. I always use the analogy of like you're building a piece of furniture. When you're recording it, you're chiseling the wood and sawing it and forming it and kind of getting all the pieces together, and you've got it in a rough assembly. And then the mixing engineer bolts it all together, sands it down, puts a coat of lacquer on it, or puts a coat of stain on it, makes it look real nice. The mastering engineer then takes it and goes, just a little rough spot here, just a little rough spot there. Now I'm going to put a clear coat over it and make it nice and shiny.
They wrap
That's
it in
my
all the bubble for the movers to come and pick it up as well.
there you go. Yeah, exactly. To get
I
it
wanted to
ready to
add
go.
to your metaphor, so I had to add in some bubble tape or something, you know.
I'll take that. I'll accept that. Absolutely. They bubble wrap it up and send it off to digital distribution and or make it ready to do that. Yeah. Yeah. That's I guess that's the yeah, that's how I understand it.
So that is essentially in a bubble. That is about a 30-minute that's a bad word. Okay, that's a 30-minute recap of kind of everything that goes on in the studio as far as the different positions and who's doing what. So that's great
Pretty
for
much.
you know, people that were curious what goes on there. So why don't we're going to go through kind of your history and your career of where you came from to where you are now. There's a lot to cover. Let's go back to your earliest musical memory. Is there anything that jumps out just when you think back to the first time that anything music related stood out to you?
This is really funny that you asked this question because I just got an alert that my dad just texted me literally as you were saying that. So my earliest musical memories, I wouldn't say I grew up in a musical family, but not in terms of playing, but definitely in terms of listening. And my earliest musical memories are my dad would play music all the time, and he loves rock and roll from the 50s and 60s. That's his big thing. So he would play it on like AM radio because that's where all those oldie stations were. They were on AM radio, and so it would be all the time. He'd have, oh man, it would be like Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, Big Bopper, Richie Valens. I mean, there's literally so many. I could name a dozen, and I'd forget 5 times as many of that. The Stones, the Beatles. It's just Dave Clark 5. Impossible to name everyone. But it was like the foundational artists of rock and roll, I'd say. So he always had that music on, and I didn't appreciate it as much when I was a kid, and now I look back and I go, that's some of the greatest music of all time. That early rock and roll is just so good. I love it. And then my mom had very specific things. She was a big Billy Joel fan, so she would play a lot of Billy Joel.
Mom's pretty badass.
Oh yeah. And she would like. There were a few movie soundtracks that she would always play. The Dirty Dancing soundtrack and the Bodyguard soundtrack.
She's a woman, so I expect that, yeah. Every girlfriend I've had has made me watch Dirty Dancing at some point, so.
There's a reason why.
Whatever, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a reason why these things are you know, some of the... I think
Footloose. Footloose.
Footloose. That was another huge one of hers. Absolutely, yes. So, so there was always music going on. So those were my earliest musical memories for sure.
Have you ever thanked your parents for having good taste in music? Because you could have been brought up with some horrendous stuff.
Oh yeah. We've talked about that. We've talked about that before many times. Absolutely.
So that was your earliest musical memory. Now, can you remember where this love of audio comes in? So that's something different than just hearing music and, oh, music sounds cool, I like music, but actually having an interest in more of the technical side. Can you remember where audio comes from? Because most people never get there where audio becomes a thing.
Right. It was a pretty natural thing in that. So when I was 13, I started playing guitar. I had a friend who was really into music, and he would actually get he was like maybe 2 years younger than me, and so when we were kids, he had guitar magazines and stuff. So we started getting into he was into a lot of like hard rock stuff, like a lot of the hair metal stuff, Motley Crue and Poison and all that. But you know, two of the bands that he kind of got me into early on were Guns N' Roses and AC/DC. And through an aunt and uncle, I was also at that time, I was big into, I still love them, but I was big into Van Halen really early on. So that real hard rock stuff. So of course, Slash and Eddie Van Halen and all these guitar gods were all over the guitar magazines. So we really got into that, and I kind of started a little love affair with the electric guitar. And at age 13, I got my first kind of starter crappy electric guitar and started taking lessons and things. Went on and played in some bands just for fun and all this. And eventually, it got to the point where I remember with my band in high school, we'd go and rent gear. Sometimes we'd rent a mixer and some speakers, and we'd do a little basement show. We'd borrow like a 4-track or an 8-track recorder and rent a couple microphones and figure out how to set all that up and record a demo or something. And I always loved that side of it. I was kind of fascinated by it, and I was always the guy who wanted to plug in the microphones and point them at stuff and figure out how the 4-track machine worked. And I wasn't some young genius at it. I was scratching my head and plugging things into the wrong place and all that. But I loved experimenting with it, and the idea of the first time I recorded something and then rewound the tape and heard it back, I was like, this is amazing.
Magic.
I thought it was so cool. Magic. I just loved that I could do that. And or just me in my bedroom, I got a little Tascam 2-input 4-track machine, and I had some early sort of music making software, and I'd record like a drum and bass thing that I had programmed off the computer. I'd record that onto one mono track. I recorded a vocal onto one mono track, and then 2 guitars. And I remember recording the first guitar and then recording the second one, and I panned them hard left and hard right, and it sounded like the biggest thing I had ever heard. It sounded so cool, and I was just hooked. I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And on from there, I started reading recording magazines. I got a subscription to Recording Magazine and I think Home Recording Magazine. I think those were 2 different ones. And I would just flip through there and look at pictures of microphones and read gear reviews and stuff, barely knowing what any of it was. And then, seeing pictures of an SSL console and things like that, and just going, like, this is amazing. And all the while, just kind of slowly, as technology evolved, I got like a little mini disc 4-track recording thing, and I probably spent all of my money on technology that went out of date like so quickly, but it was just the time, and that's how you learned. And I just, the bug got me, and it just went down the rabbit hole from there gradually, but definitely it definitely like captured me full on.
What's amazing as a musician is when you write music or you write a song, there's something now where there was nothing before. So before you existed, there was not this song, and you've created something from nothing, and it is like magic. And then the same thing as an audio engineer, where there was nothing and now there's this recording. There's something tangible that you can play and hold a CD in your hand or an album. And I always found that was kind of like magic. It's like your secret magic trick that you get to perform.
I still love that. I still feel that way in a it's a little bit different now because I know what's going on, and it's like more of a job. It's more of just like a task that's part of my job to do that. But I'm happy that I still get that feeling, and that still brings me great satisfaction.
Do you think that playing the guitar has helped you as a engineer and producer in the studio when working with other musicians? Like, you can speak their language better, or you understand more what's going on with the instruments. Does that help at all?
100%, all of that you just mentioned. It's still a musical job, even though there's a big technical aspect of it. You still have to be a musical individual to do this job. I don't. There are certain engineering, audio engineering positions that would be far more on the technical side, and there are some brilliant people that handle huge broadcasts and all this stuff that I would be, totally lost on. But in terms of working with artists and musicians and songwriters and so on, I think you have to have musicality or yeah, I mean, I don't know it any other way. So, but I just can't imagine how I can't imagine trying to do this job without that. And I definitely do see where that has been an advantage. Absolutely. And it's very common. I mean, it's more common than not for that to be the case. But you really do need that. So yeah, that's helped immensely. You got to know about music, no matter what your instrument, no matter what it is.
You said your love of audio kicked in when you were playing in bands and figuring out equipment and recording. What is the worst band name that you've been in of all the bands, or are there a few that are, or are they all awesome? Are you biased and you only had incredible band names?
I don't know about incredible, but I there were probably some really goofy ones as a kid before I actually started playing music. I do remember me and my friends, we made up some fake bands and just, we would just kind of like goof on that and make up fake bands. So those probably had some goofy names, but actual bands, I don't think there was ever a bad band name. And I'm going to flip that question to in high school, my band was called kind of a mouthful. But it was called Mercury Solstice.
Okay.
And the singer was like a massive Smashing Pumpkins fan. So he took those words out of a line from a Smashing Pumpkins song. Which one, I don't even know. But he came up with the name Mercury Solstice, and I thought that was really cool. And we had some like kind of like funky, really cheesy digital art, almost like a corona of a sun of the sun, or that kind of looked tie-dyed, and it said Mercury Solstice in the middle. And
you went all in with that band name, which I appreciate.
We committed. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought for like, I thought it was pretty good. I still think that's decent for a high school band name. I was like, yeah.
It sounds like you deep down you're still hoping for a reunion, that it's still possible that this band could come out and with your newfound your newfound expertise in the studio, you'd have killer recordings. Anyways, I'm just planting a seed. You don't have to respond to that. If iPods existed back when we were 16, what would I find on your iPod? A few songs, a few artists, a few albums.
Oh. It would have been rock music from the 90s. That's my all-time favorite music is music of the 90s. And even to narrow it down further, like the early and mid 90s, 1990 to 94 would be like one period where there was just so much amazing music.
Yeah.
And then in the second half as well, but yeah, absolutely. The music of the 90s, and that would have spanned a huge. There would be like some pop music on there. There would be rock stuff, hard rock. The Seattle bands, the big Seattle bands, Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots. I know they're not from Seattle.
How insane. So yeah, 91 to 94 is like the craziest period for rock music. And 91,
bonkers.
have you seen what happened in 91? So 91, there's Metallica, the Black Album. There's Chili Peppers, Blood, Sex, Sugar, Magic. There's 91. It was like every big artist put out a huge album. So your Soundgarden in 91, Nirvana Nevermind is 91, I believe.
I believe it's 91. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So I've seen articles
it's
like
insane.
1991, the greatest year. Yeah. Alice in Chains and man, it's Pearl Jam, 91.
Yep.
Is that 10 that came out in 91? It was nuts. just unbelievable. Every few weeks, it was like greatest of all time albums that came out every few weeks that
year. Yeah. And then all of these bands had their like follow-up albums after that. I was going to say second album, but yeah. But obviously Soundgarden was putting out albums in the 80s, and Nirvana had Bleach in like 89 and all this. And so, but yeah, all of these bands had follow-up albums to those 91, 92 albums. So 93 and 94, these bands had albums that were, you know, like as big. It's crazy. It was a crazy time to be a kid getting into music, and that music just captured me 100%, and I still love it. It's still what I listen to at least 50% of the time. I throw on music from that era, and it's just it like takes me back. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I have a quote here that comes into us from another guest, and this ties together because this man produced some of the greatest 90s albums in rock. So this is Mr. David Bottrell, who's done some Tool albums, Muse, Stained, and this is what he has to say about what he loves most about Mr. Kevin Dietz as a person and as a musician and engineer and producer. So Mr. David Bottrell says, we worked on projects for Circa Survive, Stone Sour, and Placebo together. I started working with Kev. That's how much he knows you. He just calls you Kev. When he was fresh out of Metalworks Institute. He was thorough and enthusiastic then, and I've watched him develop into a fantastic engineer and producer, and I'm sure he'll be producing great music for years to come. So that's from rock producer, legend, Mr. David Bottrell.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you for the kind words and for the many years of mentorship. You know, to say I learned a ton from David Bottrell is an understatement. Yeah, he's I've learned so much from him. His resume speaks for itself. The Placebo album I mentioned, he produced that one as well, and just amazing learning experiences, and super grateful for those times and to get to work on those projects, learn from him. Just crazy. You know, very fortunate.
And in Circa Survive, that was Blue Sky something. It's
Blue
3
Sky
words.
Noise, yeah.
Blue Sky Noise. I remember listening to that when it came out. I saw Circa Survive at the Taste of Chaos Festival way back in Ottawa. This is like early 2000s with the Deftones. That's like almost all I remember. I think Deftones, Atreyu, Circa Survive. It was like a bunch of those big ones.
Amazing.
And then Stone Sour. So that is the singer from Slipknot. That is his side project. They've sold millions of albums as well. They've won Grammys. They've had, #1 singles.
Awesome band.
Yeah. So you were in the studio with Corey Taylor. This is a real thing?
No.
Okay.
No. Dave Bottrell produced their double album. If I'm getting this right, the House of Golden Bones. It was like part 1 and part 2. He produced that album, and he went down to Iowa, I believe, to do that with them. Yeah. So we did some string overdubs. He came into Metalworks, and there's like strings on, I think, 3 songs, 2 on one album and 1 song of strings on like the second part of it or whatever. And so there was some string players came in, and I was the engineer for those sessions to do some strings on that album.
It's
so unfortunately didn't get to meet Corey Taylor. What a cool dude he is. I think he's awesome. Mm-hmm. But again, just very very grateful to get to do a small contribution to an album like that, to a band like that. It's that's the gig, and I'm happy to do it, and I'm grateful.
I think it's good that you brought that up, because most people don't realize that, they think that a full band goes into one studio and they're there for whatever, a couple of weeks and they come out with an album. But the truth is sometimes it's like the drums are recorded there, bass and guitar, vocalist is over there, gets mixed one place, mastered here, and it's like a 10 studio project. So I think it's cool for our listeners to hear that actually it was, you were adding to the embellishment, you were adding the goodies to some of the songs that were mostly finished at that point.
Yeah, and again, that's the job as an audio engineer. You sometimes you're there just to do a couple things. Maybe they just need a session of this, and you're the go-to on that, or for the Stone Sour thing, I was on staff at Metalworks, and Dave would come in there often, and so he booked in. He knew the room, he knew the people, and we got it done.
When you decided that you wanted to have a career in music as an audio engineer, did you ever have a fear of not being able to make a living? The entertainment industry is very difficult waters to navigate. Sometimes, despite your talent, despite your resume, it's hard to make a good living. Did those fears ever cross your mind in the beginning, or was it just, this is something I love, this is what I want to do with my life, and I'll figure this
out? The word "did" implies that that's a thing of the past.
I hear you.
Yeah, for sure. It was more so the latter point that you mentioned, because when I decided I wanted a career in music was before I came out here to go to school for audio engineering and then get into it. I'm from Edmonton originally, and I was apprenticing as an electrician in the oil field. It was good work, good money. Cost of living was low and wages were high in Edmonton at that time, so could have easily just continued on with that and done that thing, gone that path, and it would have been great, would have been perfectly fine. But I just had this burning desire, and just had sort of a little, I don't know, not a midlife crisis, but quarter life crisis maybe. And I said to myself, what am I doing? Like this, ultimately, this isn't making me happy. It's kind of like the whole thing, you got one life to live. So I decided, well, I'll take a chance and go do this. And I, kind of planned it all out and figured it out. And I did. So I knew that I was going all in on it long ago. Where that leads, I guess I was like, I'm just going to figure it out. Kind of what's the worst that could happen? So I went and did that. And what I've found is that, to kind of go back to the first point about, it's a tough way to make a living, and the just given the industry and whatnot. Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I've discovered along the way. And again, you just adapt. Thankfully, I'm able to navigate that with an adult sensibility and more maturity than when I started out. So I'm able to be more pragmatic about it and just deal with it. I mean, everyone is dealing with how to make a living at what they do, whether they're pursuing their passion or not. And everyone is subject to changes in the economy and in society and in technology. So you just have to navigate it. You have to, one way or another. So that could lead to a whole rabbit hole discussion of a different nature. But yeah, I just like, this is what I love to do. You always hear those sayings, I guess, for lack of a better word, where people say, follow your passions and you'll never work a day in your life, which is, of course, not true, because sometimes following your passion is way more work than just coasting on something that means nothing to you. But the principle of that is you get, the trade-off is you get so much personal satisfaction. And I still think about that every day. I've got a session coming up in a couple days with a band of guys who they work with so many different artists, and but they mostly do country music, and they're just some of my favorite people to work with. Their band is called The Agenda, and these guys just they play with so many different artists. It's because they're so good and they're such great guys. So they end up being like the band for many different solo artists, and it's just the most fun ever working with them. I just look forward to it. It'll be a long day in the studio. It's a full band setup. There's a lot to do, but we've done it a dozen times before, and we know the drill. And even though there's plenty of work to do that day, we're all going to be laughing and smiling the whole day, and we'll get great results. So a day like that is, it's not as much like work as other things I could be doing. In fact, it's far more enjoyable than I think most other things I could think of doing. So, so grateful for that, to be able to do things like that. So that's kind of the trade-off.
Yeah. Do you find yourself at different moments where things are going very well in the studio, where you just stop and you think, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. Like, I can't believe that this is my career. I'm not digging ditches. I'm in a studio with musicians recording great music. Everything sounds awesome. We're in a flow state. Everyone's happy. And you just kind of hit that bliss point.
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. And I never want to lose that. Even though sometimes it is about buckling down and getting to work. There are definitely sessions that are long, that are busy, that there's lots to do, and I don't have a chance to let that thought come in and percolate until after the session. That's not to say that during the thing I'm stressed, and then after I go, oh, you know what, that was actually really fun. Not at all. But like you said, the flow state, I'm probably like in tunnel vision work mode. And then after a long day, I get home and I'm tired, mentally exhausted, and I go, that was a good day. Very, like a huge feeling of satisfaction. And, the next day I'm like, oh, I can't wait to do that again.
When we recorded songs together for my album, it was, let's say, about 2 weeks worth of recording to get just 18 minutes. People don't realize how much time it takes, like regardless of talent, and they have to redo it over and over again. But just in general, just to get, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes of music, it takes hours and weeks and months to do. And I guess one of my biggest takeaways from working with you is just how relaxed you are. You're just very relaxed. You're, just very comfortable there, just easygoing, fun. How much do you think that those qualities have helped you to have this amount of longevity in this industry and to have this amount of success?
I appreciate you saying that. That's kind of that's my goal. That's how I want to operate. That's how that's the kind of vibe I want to bring to a session. Ultimately, I'm there for the artist. When we did your album, I'm there for you to give you the best thing that you can get. I'm there to help you achieve a higher level of your artistic vision. So that to me is that is a kind of relaxed and fun thing. A long time ago, one of the best pieces of advice that I got about working in this industry was from, you remember Alfio from Metalworks.
Yes.
He said, I can't remember who, I remember being in Studio One and talking with him and someone else, and I don't remember who it was, but we were in there, and he was saying, Yeah, and I believe he got this piece of advice from someone as well. And he said, "Do you know how to get work and you know be someone in this industry and have a career? Like, I don't know, you gotta have like really good technical chops and stuff." He's like, "No, oh, you got to I don't know, you got to hustle, you got to always be blah blah." He said, "No." He said the key is uh, be the kind of people, be the kind of person that people want to work with. And I instantly got that. I was like, that makes so much sense. Every business, every business is a people business when it comes down to it. You know, so um, you want to be a good person. You want to be easygoing. You want to be agreeable. You want to be you just want to be a good person, so, someone who people want to work with. It's almost so simple that it's hard to describe, But that to me is one thing I love about this job is that I get to express my personality. I get to put my personality into it, and that's a bonus. I mean, if you have a good personality, I guess that's a bonus. If you don't, well, that doesn't help you anywhere,
Sorry.
right? But
Yeah.
but I love that you get to express your personality, and I love music, and I love the recording process and everything. So yeah, I would hope that I bring that vibe to a recording session. And just from what I found, that's there's a lot of synergy there with musicians and artists. That's how they want to be as well. And at the same time, you get the work done. The foundation of all that is that you're going to do good work. But that to me that's the cost of entry. You
The
have to
bare
be able to
minimum.
do,
Yeah.
that's the bare minimum. You have to be able to do what you do well. You have to know your stuff. Above and beyond that, it's like, what can you as a person bring to the room? Which is like anything, right? Whenever you in a social situation, when you go into a room, what do you bring to that social interaction or a conversation with someone? It's all the same kind of thing. So I think, I don't know, I just think that has helped me uh, make more friends and colleagues, and be someone who people like to work with.
Yeah, I've heard it in the business world that uh, we do business with people that we like, that we trust, and that we respect, and that we won't always remember what people say, but we'll always remember the way that they made us feel. And I guess my thoughts on why it's so great to have your type of personality in the studio is that with the money on the line for whoever's paying for it, which can be a lot, with the pressure, if you're following up a huge album with this album, there's a lot of pressure on you. All those things can lead to a very intense or fearful environment. So I feel like you need someone in the studio that you can feel that they're relaxed, they're confident, we're going to do this, they're fun, they break the ice and break the tension. I feel like that's why your temperament is so great, because it's kind of the polarity of the extreme pressure and versus where you're at when you come in.
Well said. I agree, and thank you for that. One thing you mentioned is that an artist comes in and there's money on the line and everything. I have big respect for that. I don't kind of slough that off. I respect the fact that this person is coming in with their hard-earned dollars to put toward their artistic vision. That's a lot of responsibility on them, and therefore on me as well. So I take that very seriously, and it makes me feel good to deliver value for people's time and money. That's hugely important to me.
So shortly after you graduated in audio engineering, you became the lead engineer, the head engineer at Metalworks Studios. So what did it mean to you to not only get a job as a head engineer at a studio, which is a big deal, but at the time, at least, the number one recording studio in Canada. It's like you're at the pinnacle at a pretty young age, and I believe fairly quickly. What did that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was fairly quickly, because right out of school, I started working at the production company for like 6 months, and then there was an opening at the studio, and then I got in there.
So
So I
maybe not
feel it
quickly,
was,
but at a young
yeah,
age. You were a young guy as the head engineer at
yeah,
Metalworks, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah, because you're still
yeah.
a young guy. Look at you. What is this?
Fountain of youth. Music
Yeah,
keeps you
yeah.
young.
We got some
What can you
sexy
say?
filters going on here, or
I
maybe
need
we
it.
have
Help
no
me.
filters.
I don't know.
I got the Brad
Uh,
Pitt filter for everyone here. Yeah.
Amazing. So, like, I mean, it took a few years. I don't remember the exact year that I like became the head engineer. I don't know if it was like halfway through, but it wasn't less than that. It wasn't less than halfway through. I might have been the
For
head
three
engineer for
years,
maybe
three and a
like
half years, or something.
something like that. It could have been, yeah.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, it meant a lot in a few ways. One is that I was like, okay, well, that's like a career step then. So that shows that, they feel they can put more responsibility on my shoulders, which means I have proven myself as someone who knows his craft and can work with clients no problem, and get along with a wide range of people, and they can trust me to handle the business of the studio, being, someone comes in, they book the session, and then they trust that it's in my hands and I'm not gonna, mess it up. So that meant a lot. It meant a lot to me because fundamentally, like, I love the craft. I love the trade of audio engineering. I truly love it. So I want to be a I want to be, an expert in my field. And the key word is I want to be. I don't feel like I am. I have a lot of good experience, but I have my whole lifetime ahead of me to learn even more. So I don't feel like I've, arrived yet. I look up to my idols in the field, and I don't feel anywhere near that. So that's my motivation to just keep going, because I'm just obsessed over it. I just love the craft of it. So to have come out from Edmonton and done a major life change and career change, gone through school, put in all these years of work at the studio, and then to be named like the top position that you could be at a commercial studio. Yeah, that meant a lot. It just felt like a personal achievement. It just felt like a bit of a benchmark, and on from there, I was like, okay, now I'm at that next level, and now it's time to keep going. The hard work certainly doesn't stop there. It's a new level of responsibility and work begins there.
So you were there at Metalworks for about 7 years, and now you've been freelance for about 7 years. What are the big differences between being at a specific studio or being completely freelance? What is life like? What changes? The pros
Well,
and cons, all that stuff.
yeah, everything changes. When you're on staff at a studio, when I was on staff, you don't get to pick and choose your sessions. Whatever comes through the door, whoever they book, they tell you what, when, who, everything that you'll be doing, and you don't have a choice whether you like the music, whether the musicians are good or not, or whether the hours are crazy, or whether it's reasonable or whatever. You don't have a choice, and that's kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? That's kind of like the testing grounds of how you approach that job. it's also a great way to gain experience because I, would literally work on all types of music, or a corporate voiceover would kind. They'd come in with a script, and I had to follow along, and they'd redo a line, and I'd have to edit that in, and things like that. Many different producers and engineers would come in, all with their different styles, all with their different idiosyncrasies and ways they like to work, and I had to adapt to that right away, instantly, immediately. I had to get on their wavelength and provide for them. So, where am I going? I've gone on a tangent here, and I've forgotten
just the benefits and the downfalls and
right.
all those things. Yeah.
Okay, so that's life. That's life at the studio. You're not in control of your own schedule. You're not in control of the projects you do, but you are. I don't know. You get a steady paycheck. You get all this work comes to you. Like, I mean, you mentioned, right? David Bottrell books in with an amazing project. Boom, there you are. You're on it. How else would I have gotten a credit on a Stone Sour record or Placebo or Circa Survive? So there are huge benefits, and there's responsibilities with that too. But those are some of the benefits, and just the vast range of experience, the learning that you do while on that job is just second to none. School can't teach it. Doing it on your own can't teach it. There's a lot of resources these days to learn from people like that. A lot of online resources, but there's just no match for the studio thing. So I feel very fortunate to have done that. Going freelance, the bonus is that you're in control of your own schedule, although you have to keep busy to pay the bills, to bring in the income. So it's not like being in control of your own schedule means, I can do whatever I want. In fact, sometimes you've got to like pile stuff on because, the studio manager isn't just going to call you up and say, hey, this thing is happening, so here's the deal. And you're like, oh, great. You have to, you are your own studio manager. You are your own client relations individual. You're your own bookkeeper. You are responsible for all of it. And in my mind, that's also a benefit, because then it's all in your hands, and that's fantastic. It is also scary at times, right? Because you're responsible for all of it. It's all on you.
The safety net has disappeared a little bit, but with the safety net that's been removed, there's also a level of freedom that you didn't have.
Exactly. And the safety net has been removed, but so has the glass ceiling, right? So, and this plays into more like, I know exactly what I'm talking about. This plays into even more like high level business principles in general, and which are things I've been, learning about and researching and also fascinated by over the last few years. But being freelance is it's a big flip, but ultimately it's more liberating, and it unlocks more potential ultimately.
As freelance now, going freelance, do you find that you're bringing artists and bands into a specific studio more frequently than others, or are you going wherever the bands want to record, or a mix of both?
It's a mix of both, but mostly, like the vast majority, is they come to me and say, here's what we want to do. How should we go about doing it? And I say, well, we could go here, we could go there. Here's kind of our options. So that would be like wearing that producer hat to go, okay, I'll figure this out. But sometimes people call me up and they go, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to book in here, and can you do it? And I'm like, yeah, great. I had no say in where the session's happening or the dates or anything, blah, blah, blah. And I'm, being like the guy for hire to do my specific task. Someone else is taking care of that part of it, and they want me to, we need you to just do this role. And I'm, obviously happy to do that.
I guess it
So it
depends on
happens a
their,
number of different ways.
yeah, I guess it depends on their location and their budget as well, amongst other things.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, yeah. It's a total moving target in that regard. Yeah.
So I have a list of some of the artists that you've worked with. So I'm going to read through this real quick, and then we can dive into any of those artists specifically. So artists you've worked with: the Glorious Sons, JJ Wild, the Cranberries, Protest the Hero, Alexisonfire, Circa Survive, Portugal the Man, Silverchair, Stone Sour, Billy Talent. Got to catch my breath. Silverstein, Finger 11, Sam Roberts, Tom Cochrane. So that's just I looked through the massive list and I brought it down to that more, a tinier list that's still a mouthful. So when you hear that list, or when I'm looking at it, how proud are you of that resume that you've built? And if you think back to the day you graduated in audio engineering, could you ever imagine that you would have compiled those names on your resume?
I wouldn't have imagined, but that is what I wanted. I wanted to, for lack of a better way of putting it, I wanted to come out here and do this at that level. I was already kind of doing it at like a very amateur level, just on my own, and having a lot of fun doing that. I wanted to do it at this level because I wanted to be in the room with people like that. And that's kind of what guided my decision to come out here and, try to get a foot in the door at a big studio, because I wanted to work on Neve and SSL consoles. I wanted to work with artists like this. I wanted to work with producers like the people I've been fortunate enough to work with. So I wouldn't have imagined necessarily, but it is in the back of my mind. That is what I wanted. Do I feel proud? Maybe a little, but far more than that, I feel grateful. I feel grateful for those opportunities, and very, very little on the proud side, and far more on the grateful side. I completely recognize that I put in the years and I put in the work, but these days for me it's all about the attitude of gratitude. So that's far more where I lean on that. But yeah, I'm proud too. Yes.
We have a question sent in here. This is from Francois Racine. He says, "I'm a big fan of Billy Talent. Having worked with them, are there any special stories about the band that you could share?" So I guess if you can share in what capacity you worked with them. I believe it was a live album. And then is there anything for the Billy Talent fan that you could give us that is not in the mainstream that we don't know about?
So yeah, it was a long time ago. I feel like it might have been 2009, maybe. I'd have to check. Billy Talent did. iTunes was Apple Music. iTunes was coming into Metalworks and doing sessions with artists called it was like Billy Talent iTunes Live. So they would come into the studio, we'd set the whole band up, and they would play live off the floor and do like a couple full takes, no overdubs, no fixing or anything. They'd do a live in studio performance, and it would be like 4 songs recorded in one day and then mixed the next day, and then iTunes would package that up as I think they would call it like Billy Talent iTunes exclusive, and it would be, they would intersperse some of their album tracks, some of these live recorded tracks that we did, and then some interview tracks that they would do at the studio on the spot as well. It was a cool little concept, and we did a bunch of those, and they were fun. They were a lot of work. I believe Eric Ratz engineered and mixed that one. He did, in fact, yes, and he still works with Billy Talent to this day. Another engineer who I'm very fortunate to have gotten to work with, because he's amazing at what he does. And I guess what I remember from that session was Ian Dessaw and Johnny, the bass player, out on the floor, and we were still getting stuff set up, and they had their amps going and stuff, and they were just standing face to face, and they're like, okay, let's go over this thing. Their third album had just come out. It was, so the live tracks they did off that was from Billy Talent 3, which I think is such an awesome album. And they just stood face to face, like just 2 feet apart type thing, and just started like playing one of those classic Billy Talent lines. I can't remember what song it was from, and it was just one of those fast, intricate type of lines that they do, and they were so absolutely rock solid playing together in the air. It was just, and I just remember walking right by them as they were doing that, you know, probably carrying a microphone to go set it up somewhere and just doing a double take. Like, these guys are phenomenal. They're just amazing musicians. I've gotten to do some work with Ian and David Bottrell as well, for an organization called Make Music Matter. And Ian plays guitar on a lot of the projects that have been done for that organization. And he's just an amazing musician. And he's got, you know, awesome gear. He's a guitar player. He's a total tone guy. And it's just cool to talk everything from like guitar strings to amps to pickups and all this stuff. You can go total guitar nerd with them. And yeah, I don't remember like a specific you know, thing that happened or a funny moment or anything. I just remember being just like wowed by their musicianship, and I was like, yeah, no wonder these guys are who they are. They're just a killer band.
Well, I think that's a cool moment, seeing the guys jam. I think that's what
Yeah.
I wanted to hear about. So that's cool. So Billy Talent is actually playing Ottawa in April. So Billy Talent with Rise Against
Cool.
and No Bro. So
Cool.
maybe,
That's a good show.
yeah, we'll have to grab a ticket for that. And I wanted to ask you, which band or artist were you the biggest fan of before working with them?
The ones that come to mind that I would say I was, you know, well familiar with and truly a fan of before they came in would be Silverchair. There's a big Silverchair fan in that 90s phase. I mean, I love their
Frog Stomp 94 is like my top 10 albums of all time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love all their stuff. It you know, it changed over time, but I was here for it. I thought it was great. Placebo, I got into Placebo late, like maybe only a couple years before I left Edmonton. And they had, you know, like 4 albums out by that time. But there was one album of theirs in particular called Sleeping with Ghosts. Or was it the one before it? I don't remember. But
this is after they were big with Pure Morning. Like Pure Morning was the single that exploded worldwide. This is after that you got into them?
It was. And I got to play the Pure Morning guitar in the studio during that session. Their guitar tech was showing me their guitars, and he goes, check this one out, and he like handed it to me, and I put it on. He's like, just strum it, and it's just open tuned, and I one strum, and he's like, you know what guitar that is? I'm like, oh yeah, it's the Pure Morning guitar. This is really cool. But yeah, it was like 4 albums after that. Yeah, I think it was the album Sleeping with Ghosts. I remember being out at a alternative club, and I mean like an actual alternative club in in Edmonton called New City, and the on like Saturday nights it was the big club night, but they would play goth and industrial and punk and all this cool music, and a song came on, and I was like, this sounds like Placebo, but I don't recognize the song. I was like, this is a kick-ass song. So I went up to the DJ booth and I said, hey, what song was that? I said, it's Placebo. And I think the song was called Bitter End or The Bitter End. And I was like, that's cool. Went out and bought the album and I was like, you know what? I really dig this band now. And then they had one more album after that I really liked. And then it was the album that I got to work on. So that was a total thrill. And then, I guess this is in chronological order. And then working with the Cranberries, it's like in that early '90s thing, right? They were huge, and great songs and catchy and all over the radio and everything. But Dolores's voice was just so unique, and it the way she expressed those lyrics. So being a teenager, being a fan of the band and all that music of the '90s, and then getting to work with them, and the producer of that album, the producer of all their big albums, Stephen Street, he came over from London to produce that album, and he's worked with he's done like the Smiths and Morrissey and Blur and those big Cranberries records. So I was like, yeah, I'm like a fan of your work too. So I'd say Silverchair, Placebo, and the Cranberries were bands that I was a fan of before they came in and I got to work with them. There's others. I know I'm forgetting some others, but those were, I was the biggest fan, I would say, of those bands.
I just remembered when you talked about the Cranberries that back in the day, do you remember the Columbia House where it's like you'd order 11 CDs for like $1 and they'd send you 9 of them were the wrong album, and then you would send them back. Like you'd end up paying full price eventually because of all the mistakes. But I got I think the album was No Need to Argue. The one that had Zombie on it was like 94 or something. I remember having that album and it being pretty intense, for a young buck. I was like, this is crazy, man. These guys are awesome. And I guess a quick story. So was it the album Roses that was at Metalworks?
Yes. Yep.
So during that time, I remember walking through the studios to use the washroom, and suddenly it wasn't 2 bathrooms that were, guy or girl, it's for anybody. And then I remember one day I go and there's a woman's bathroom now. One of them is switched, and it was that, Dolores was recording and she preferred that there was a woman only bathroom. And I believe to this day, at least as long as I was there, it remained the woman's bathroom, influenced by her. And I'm sure all the women appreciate having their own space because of that.
I remember, I would have never remembered that had you not brought it up, but I think you're 100% correct. And I think she had some, her justification for it was, she's like, these guys messy. Can I just have, a space just for the gals or something? Yeah. That's funny that you remember that. Yeah.
And absolutely. It's a completely it's a legit valid request, and anyways, I thought that was cool. And then the other thing was, there was one day where I got into Metalworks, and I think at this point I was just like an assistant to some of the higher ups. This is before I did events and marketing and sales and all this stuff. And they said, oh, we have the Cranberries here, they're recording in the studio. They're like, here's a really good camera, can you go do a photo shoot for them? So I went in, like, I'm not a photographer, but I think they just wanted some fresh photos maybe of them. So I had like an hour with the Cranberries where I'm out in the parking lot taking pictures of them. I'm in the studio taking pictures with them. So I had just like an hour with them as this random dude with a camera. So that's that's awesome. These are just coming back to me. Like I forgot that this stuff happened, but then, as we're weaving a path with this conversation where we don't know where it's heading, it just kind of triggers these memories and these questions and these thoughts. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's the fun thing about, spending a length of time in one place doing one thing is you gather a lot of cool memories for sure.
I've heard that one of the reasons why long form interviews and podcasts have become so popular is that because the two people that are talking, so you and I, because we don't actually know where this is headed exactly, that the audience feels that and they feel like they're on this journey where all of us together are organically weaving through this adventure and this narrative and this story, and we all start together, then we kind of have no idea what's going on, and then we all end together.
Yeah.
And it actually feels, as an audience, as a listener, it feels like they're a part of it more so than watching a 10-minute interview on TV where it's edited and super polished. Do you think there's any truth to that?
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head with the word organic. You know, conversation is what is what we do as humans, right? That's the I don't know, that's kind of everything, isn't it? So I think it's great, and I for me that's the most comfortable thing. I hope that you know, I don't want to get on a kick about it, but I hope that younger generations, I don't even know what it's at now. Like millennials are the old generation now, so I don't know if it's Gen Z, Gen whatever the labels are. I just hope that younger generations that grow up with technology don't lose the ability to just have a conversation, and you know, express an idea, then listen and go back and forth. There's you know, there's a tendency to just write everything or text everything, and there's no substitute for just human interaction. And even though I'm in Toronto and you're in Ottawa, this is still the exact same thing. So technology allows us to sort of bridge that gap. We're having a real time conversation, ideas going back and forth. It's great. You would have to be, you know, pretty much in the same room or have like a satellite uplink or whatever it was back in the day. But we can do this here now. But you're right, it is still just an organic conversation. And you know, we know what we're talking about. We know, you know, what our sort of topic of conversation is. It's not like we're out having a beer and just shooting the shit about whatever. But at the same time, yeah, it's totally loose and organic. And I think because that's part of human nature to have just natural conversations, I'm not surprised that that type of thing resonates with people, and people appreciate that more. And, you know, yeah, we live in a time where everything is sound bites and edited and no one trusts anything. So it's great to just have a conversation.
Do you remember the first time you heard a song that you recorded on the radio, or the first time you saw some of the albums you worked on the charts? And I know in recent times you've had singles that have gone to number one with certain bands and albums that have topped the charts, and maybe that's more frequent now. So do you remember the first time those things happened? And then do you still get a kick out of it happening now, or is that almost expected at this point?
Oh no, no, it's not, definitely not expected, and it's really fun to just randomly hear a song out there. I I don't remember the first time. I remember on that Protest the Hero album, Fortress. Uh, I remember hearing when The Edge premiered the first single, and you know, Protest the Hero is like intense music, so. Um, the Edge, obviously, it's kind of like the hometown hero type of thing, so they're obviously going to play this stuff, but that type of music is not in regular rotation on the Edge. So I thought it was really cool that, you know, the big corporate radio station in Toronto was premiering the song, and I'd heard these songs before because I was involved in the album, but I thought that was a really cool thing to hear it on the radio. And there have been many since, you know, just kind of driving around or out and about, and you hear something and I go, oh yeah, it's just very cool. Again, I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to work with artists who are out there like that, who get their stuff out there. But when you asked that, it reminded me of I was in the big LCBO like last summer, 2 summers ago, in the big LCBO downtown. What's it called? Summerhill, the one that's in the big train station. It's just a gorgeous building, and I was just walking through it, and there was just music playing on the PA. And I stopped for a second. I was like, I know this song. I produced, recorded, and mixed this song, and it was a song by a band from Vancouver called The Long War, who had won the CBC Searchlight competition that year, and then they came out to Metalworks, and we did like an album in like 10 days or something with them, and I recorded, mixed it, helped them to produce it and everything, and it was just it was on a playlist, and that was playing in that LCBO, and I actually took up my phone and caught the very end of it. I recorded a video of the speaker in the ceiling, and you can just faintly hear it, and then I sent it to the band saying, "Hey, I just heard you guys randomly in the LCBO," and that was super cool. That put a big smile on my face, and I mean that's an album that I did start to finish with that band, and it was one of my favorite recording sessions of all time. It was just such a fun time, and they're such great people, and I love the work we did. So that was like, yeah, there was a sense of pride, gratitude, and just like good vibe, good feel from that, from things like that. So I love it. Yeah.
Isn't there a Glorious Sons song that's like gone #1 in the US on the rock charts? Like there's some pretty crazy stuff. Like, can you've been, I could be wrong, but I believe you've been working with Glorious Sons for several years, like on different projects. Isn't it crazy how far they've come? Like from when they started, it's like,
Oh yeah.
they're playing arenas. They've broken through in the US on the rock charts. Yeah, how crazy is their growth, seeing them from the start to now?
It's yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. They've worked really hard at it. They've put in the miles on the road, and worked on albums and worked on their craft. They're always evolving. I would say about those guys, they're just always evolving. They've got a great team behind them, and they're cool individuals. They've all got their own personalities, and they're nice people. They're good peeps. So yeah, it's been great. It's been great to see. And yeah, they've had a couple of Billboard #1s. They had like a big song. The first thing that I worked with them on was it was a single. They came into the studio and did like 3 songs, and only one ended up getting released just as its own standalone single. And it was a song called "Kill the Lights," and it was a hit on radio, and they got like a SOCAN award for it and stuff. I didn't mix that one, but I recorded it, and then they went and did their Young Beauties and Fools album. I wasn't a part of that one. They did that in LA, and that got them a Billboard #1 for their song "Sawed Off Shotgun." And then the same producer came to Kingston, and I worked with him and the band on their album "A War on Everything," and their lead single from that, "Panic Attack," ended up hitting #1 on the Billboard rock chart for.
So that's the single.
And
That's the single I'm thinking of that went to #1 in the US. Yeah.
Oh, it would have been that, or it would have been
It's
Sawed
that
Off
one,
Shotgun
the
before that.
Panic,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Panic Attack. Yeah, and that album won that was the Juno award winning album. Well, actually, they've won the Juno award for Rock Album of the Year twice, for Young Beauties and Fools and for A War on Everything. So I mean, these guys they're a great rock band. They're the real deal. They're the real deal rock and roll. I'll say that much.
So let's pause on the Junos for a second. So you have a skewed you have a skewed reference point for the Junos, because bands like Finger 11. So we had Rick Jacket from Finger 11 on here not too long ago for a 2.5 hour interview. And
Amazing.
they finally won their first Juno on their 7th nomination. Like, that's normal. If you get nominated at all, which is hard to do, the chances of winning, it's even more unlikely. And then we have Mr. Kevin Dietz, who gets nominated for 2 Junos and wins both Junos. So you are the running going into 2022. There's like your own category essentially. So rock album of the year 2020 for the Glorious Sons Award and everything. And then the same award the next year, 2021, JJ Wilde's Ruthless. And what's historic about her winning that award, she is the first female to win the Rock Album of the Year award in 25 years, since a little album called Jagged Little Pill from Alanis Morissette, which is, I believe, like top maybe 10, 15 selling albums of all time, period. And maybe the first or second best-selling Canadian album of all time. So how insane is that? Yeah. How insane is it that you're a part of this, the first female to win that award in 25 years? Like, that's unbelievable.
Well, I'll say this. JJ Wilde, again, she's the real deal. Absolutely. She's as rock and roll as they get. She's the real deal. All kudos, all credit goes to her. And it's awesome. Again, it's so great to be. I'm so grateful to be a part of albums and songs and artists contribute to album songs and artists that get out there and that people love. I'm that's what I set out to do. Those are the type of people that I wanted to get involved with. So I love it. And I mean, in all reality, so I just want to say this just as a to clarify, it's not me that gets nominated for these Junos. It's the bands and artists win them for their albums. And, as an engineer or as a producer or as a whatever your role is, you as a peripheral person involved in that production, you can get a statue. You can say, oh, I guess you could say I won a Juno, but I always say that I got a Juno.
You worked on Juno award winning. Okay.
Yeah. I always just like to. I never like to claim what is not mine. The only category that I could personally win a Juno in would be recording engineer of the year or producer of the year, and but that's a small point. But I just think worth clarifying, just because I never want to overstate or claim something that I shouldn't. But yeah, being part of those 2 albums that won Rock Album of the Year back to back, and of course, yeah, JJ, that's definitely like a historic moment, is awesome. And again, I give all the props to them and their team, and I have gratitude to them and their team for having me contribute in the way that I do, which was in this case engineering on those albums. And that it makes me super happy, and it motivates me. I just go, okay, yeah, let's go. Like, this is great. I'm just so glad that when I see so many people going, oh yeah, Glorious Sons, love that band, JJ Wilde, oh, she's awesome. It puts a smile on my face, because I go, yeah, they are awesome. And artists like that inspire me to do my best work.
So we have a few kind words sent into the podcast here from engineer producer Brian Moncars. So he's worked with Our Lady Peace, The Trues, Never Ending White Lights, So he says Kevin Dietz is a killer engineer, producer, and all-around great human. We keep getting that, keeps coming up, that you're a great human. That's important. I've always enjoyed my time in the studio with him immensely. So some kind words from Brian that wanted to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Moncars. I can definitely reciprocate. Brian Moncars is such a good, just such a good vibe. He's always got a big smile on his face, and he would certainly be an example of be the kind of person that people want to work with. He would be a prime example of that, and obviously of the bands you listed that he's worked with, there are the list is so much longer with names of equal clout, and he's such a great dude.
We have a fan question sent in here. This one's a little different. So this is from Michael Chan, and he says, ask Kevin what he thinks about strange and quirky objects and decorations in the studio, and what impact they might have on inspiration and creating a vibe during sessions. So is that a thing of bringing in stuff? And then his second part to the question is, what was the experience like doing Mix with the Masters in California at Chris Lord Alg's studio? And he's like an all-time great mixing engineer.
Yeah.
So two-part question for you there.
I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of the right Michael Chan, who
with a skull. He brought a skull into the studio with you.
Absolutely, yes. First off, hi Mike, and thanks for the question. And yes, I had this like fluorescent green, kind of like rubber skull that I feel like I bought it at a grocery store many years ago. It's like a cheesy Halloween decoration, and there's a light bulb in the middle, and it'll light up. And skulls are cool. I like that, and this thing looked outrageous, so I bought it for $10, and I put it in I remember putting it in my apartment window and lighting it up at night and just leaving it on to be like, oh, I want someone to walk by and go, what is that? And I would bring it when I started doing sessions on my own. Yeah, I actually left it at the studio for a while, and I would bring it out and put it on the console. It was just a quirky thing. It's just one of those, it's just a vibe piece. I remember going down to a producer studio in LA, and he had this massive lava lamp, and me and my buddy, the artist I was working with, we were like, that is so cool. And we just kept staring at the lava lamp. Things like that are, it's just vibe, it's just vibe. There's the whole typical thing of, you want to set a mood, you light some candles in the studio or whatever. That's a total vibe. It's just a common thing to do, because studio spaces are often, they're made to be, to a degree, and again, not as a not as a negative connotation, but they're made to be somewhat generic, so that oftentimes they're made to be somewhat generic because there's so many different people that roll through. And it's hard to create a vibe that everyone's gonna love. They're kind
of clean and sterile, and so it's sometimes you can put in your own vibe when you come in.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So having some things like that are good ways to just help create a vibe and have a little conversation piece or whatever, or just something funny, or those are good things. So yeah, he knows about the green skull, and a few people do. Sadly, I'm not even sure if I have that green skull anymore. I've moved so many times since, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 times since I've had that skull. It may have gotten lost in the mix, or it's in a box in my storage unit somewhere. That could be the case too. But the green skull was definitely a thing.
And then, did you want to touch on the Mix with the Masters? So you were with one of the top names, period. So Chris Lord Alg is known mostly for mixing. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I believe he started out as a recording engineer. He and his brother Tom started out as recording engineers, and I think they both mix now, and they're both fantastic. Um, I actually recently with an artist I work with, we had a chance to get a song mixed by Tom Lord Alge, and he's just phenomenal. The Mix with the Masters thing was actually the same artist I'm referring to. Uh, in 2016, we went down to LA together to start working with a producer down there. This would be the guy with the crazy lava lamp, on 2 or 3 songs or something like that, for a pop duo that he was doing at the time. And uh, around that time, I had been every year I would go to the NAMM show, the big music trade show in Anaheim. So basically, we went down at like right at the beginning of January, and NAMM is at the end of January. So I stayed in California for the entire month, and so we worked for a week with this producer and got some tracks down. Then he and his music partner went back to Toronto, and I went up to Tarzana, California, where CLA's studio is, and I did this Mix with the Masters seminar, and it was a total thrill to be in his studio. You know, you walk in and he's got his gold and platinum records on the wall, and there's one that has like 10, it's an American Idiot plaque, and it's got 10 CDs, yeah. And it says presented to Chris Lord Alge for 10 million units sold of Green Day's American Idiot. I was like, this is ridiculous. And then you go into the room and he fires up the console and starts going through his mix workflow and all that stuff in the same room and on the same console and the same gear that he mixed all those crazy albums. And it was a really great experience. It was just a one-day thing, but Mix with the Masters is such a cool little organization. They you came in and there was like coffee and bagels in the morning, and then they order in sushi for lunch, and then we all did a dinner after at this Italian restaurant, and that's all included in the cost of the day. And you're there hanging out with CLA and his guys and talking about that, and just having a conversation about mixing and music and technology and stuff like that. It was fantastic. It was great. It was really, really good.
So as we close in on 2 hours, and we wrap up this conversation, are you okay if we do a rapid fire? So just quick question and answers through a few questions, because there's a few fan questions I don't want to skip as well.
Oh, wow.
If you could sit down for a conversation with anyone, alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's such a tough question. I feel like I always have answers for this, but I never remember.
Because you think outside of music too, because you're like, oh, it's anyone. Like,
yeah,
it's there's other things you like besides music and other incredible people you think of outside of music, so it's hard to choose.
Totally. And there's a lot of people who I would like. I love listening to, and I don't know, like philosophers or people with very cutting edge social opinions, or I don't know however you'd put it, but I'm hesitant to say, oh, I would love to sit down with them, because I go, what they're outputting I can listen to, and I'm fine with that. I don't necessarily feel the need to. I look at it more as a social thing. So outside of music, that's such a tough question to answer. I don't even know. As far as music is concerned, someone who comes to mind, one of my biggest influences in music and in terms of a producer would be Daniel Lanois, and I think he would be cool to. I could see myself grabbing a beer with him and talking shop, talking music and musical philosophy, because I think he's brilliant. He's one of these, he's such a unique individual. I would love to, and I feel like he's someone I could just sort of shoot the shit about this stuff with over a beer, which I love to do.
So with him, is it like his history with U2 and Neil Young, or is it him as a musician, or what is his personality? What is it specifically with him that you think would be a great great hang.
All of the above, but more like him as a musician because he's such a musical producer, and I'm inspired by his philosophies. I've never done a recording in the style of Daniel Lanois, because the way he does things is it's his own thing. But I've always like gleaned philosophies from him and been inspired by his by his kind of musicianship and his musicality. So yeah, I swear that I've listened to every interview available on YouTube or podcasts that he's ever been on. I've listened to them all twice, I'm sure. So I'm going to say him, Daniel Lanois. I would love to grab a beer with Daniel Lanois sometime.
What do you think are the top mistakes that newer engineers make in the studio? What would you say are the top, say, 2 or 3 mistakes that you see them when they come in?
I feel like these days, because
Kids
technology
these days.
is kids these days, I feel so. I obviously took a very traditional route to pursue audio engineering. I feel like these days the technology is so widely available, and I think that's a good thing overall. I think that's a good thing because there are basically no barriers to creativity and making music and recording music, and there are pros and cons to that, but I like to look at it as the pro side of it. One of the cons of that, I think, is that a lot of people tend to dive right into it. They get a microphone, an interface, some plugins, and they say, "I'm a producer, mixer, engineer." Okay, sure. I like if you produce your own music and record it yourself and mix it yourself, or other people's, I guess you are those things, absolutely. But I think a mistake is to I don't mean this. I really don't want to sound arrogant saying this, but it's like I took an approach of like I had the mind of a student the whole time. I was like, I don't know anything, and I need to learn a lot. Whereas I feel like there's often people get a hold of the technology and they go, I'm this, I'm doing it, which is great. A good example of the pro of that would be Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas, if that's how you say his name. I think he's one of these guys that got a hold of the technology, and he's just like I really think that he's completely switched on. I think he's going to be producing hit albums for the rest of his life. I think he's just one of these people who is so musical and is totally just very brilliant and took to the technology and just figured it out and got super creative and produced some great sounding stuff with it. And so I think that's a really good example. I've gotten tracks to mix from people who have recorded their whole thing themselves, and it's just like a nightmare because things sound so bad. On the other hand, I've gotten tracks to mix from people who do it themselves that sound great. So I think a mistake might be thinking that because you have this technology at your fingertips, that all of the sudden you are you're just ready to go, and you skip over sort of the fundamentals in order to just crank something out. Sometimes that can work, sometimes it doesn't. And I think when it doesn't, you need to be self-aware of that and go back and try and learn these learn the fundamentals, right? It's like learn the rules before you break them. But I'm not even talking about rules. I'm talking about techniques and tried and true principles of the craft of recording.
I recently did a podcast episode that was my top 15 albums of 2021, and both Phineas and Billie Eilish separately put out albums, and both of them made my top 15 list. So yeah, I believe Phineas is a genius, not just with her music and the writing and the recording and all that, but his music as well. So I think you're right that he's going to be a major
Yeah.
force into the future.
And he's only in his like early 20s.
Yeah, she's been
It's
big.
crazy.
So 29, she's been big for say 3, 4, 5 years, and he's now like 25, and she's now like
It's crazy.
19 or something stupid. I've seen
It's
videos of them performing
bonkers.
together where she's 12, and it's the best thing I've ever heard. Like her talent's undeniable. She's not just
I
this
agree.
little, yeah. Um,
Yep.
okay, a few more. So we have a question from Mike Nasso and
Hey!
your boy Mike. So
Yeah,
we
my
we
boy
were
Mike.
we were thinking, okay, in conversation, just like a first date, you don't want to talk politics or religion because there can be some murky water there. So generally that's a rule. So normally we want to skip politics. This isn't really politics, but because it's our boy Mike Nasso, I'm going to ask the question and you can skirt this however you want. And you're going to see it's not as bad as I just set it up to be. So he just
Okay.
wants to know if you have any thoughts on the cancel Spotify trend that's going on right now because of Joe Rogan misinformation, and then Neil Young and Joni Mitchell removing their music from Spotify, and because those two are so influential, you have India Ari took off her music, and we have almost 400 mutual friends on Facebook, you and I, and most of them are industry professionals. So I'm seeing every day more artists, more producers saying I've canceled Spotify, I'm going with Apple. Like it's a real thing and I can feel it happening. Do you have any comment on the whole cancel Spotify? And part of it is because they've paid Joe Rogan $100 million, so it's like he's their cash cow, and they believe that maybe he's spitting negative stuff or misinformation. And the other side is all the artists that complain they don't make any money from the streaming, whereas it's $1 billion company and the owner is a multimillionaire. So I've given you a lot there. You can skirt that any way
Yeah.
you want without diving too much into politics, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a huge discussion. I have been following it. I think that there's a lot of conflating the different things. Neil Young's original intent and the Joe Rogan thing and all that. There's I'm seeing a lot of people actually mixing up certain details of this, and I think it's important to stick to the facts. All I'll say about that is it's a huge mess, and Spotify. It's not like people weren't complaining about the Spotify thing before. So, hey, it's a free market society, and if Neil Young and Joni Mitchell and India Ari and any other artists want to do that with their material, they are free to, and I can't say they're wrong for doing so. I definitely think that music is valued or undervalued in a very strange way these days. So I would be happy to see things shift, and I'm on the side of the artists when it comes down to it. If there's no artists, I don't get to do what I do, and I want to participate in that side of it. Music has always been a commodity. If you look at how record deals were structured back in the day, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's different economics in different times and different technologies, but it's man, it's such a huge mess. But the whole thing has always been churning in weird ways. It's so multifaceted that it's like, that's a whole podcast on its own. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't want to dive into it further than that, but it's a big mess. And, but I hope that we see progress out of it. I just hope that we're always progressing, and progress can be a little messy, to get there. And, just because it's messy doesn't mean that it's progress, and it doesn't mean that it's regress. I guess we'll see. I just hope that I just hope that individual people communicating in person or over social media and stuff, I just hope that we can get back to respectful discourse and keeping in mind that, at the end of the day, we're all kind of, the majority of people are sort of striving for the same thing: health, happiness, and pursue their hopes and dreams, and human connection and all that. So I really hope we can get back to that, because there's definitely some vitriolic behavior going on right now. So I got to leave it at that. I think about these things all the time. But
you
man,
skirted that. You skirted that nicely without angering anybody involved, which is good. So, what's the best concert you've ever seen?
Ooh, abruptly switching gears here.
Yeah. Rapid fire,
best concert I've ever seen. I mean, consistently, I've probably seen 9 Inch Nails 8 times over the years.
That's the best concert I've ever seen. 9 Inch Nails. There you go.
It consistently is. It's just fantastic. But another one that pops out that just blew me away was years ago. I went to see Rammstein, and it was so over the top in the best way possible, and it was that was the single best show I've ever seen. Because of the craziness of it.
What do you think their pyrotechnics budget is?
Well, I have no idea about the economics of pyrotechnics.
Did they have lots of pyro? I think of pyro when I think of Rammstein.
They certainly did, and the ticket, like, this was at the ACC, and the tickets were. It was like $100 for a floor ticket or $80 for like the bowl, and I had a upper. Yeah, so I paid $80 for a ticket, and the other ones were $100. It was a sold out show, and you could see where every dollar of that went. So, I don't know. Yeah, again, I'm not too sure of the economics of a show that size. But if I had paid $100, if I had paid $150, I would have been thrilled with that show. So to me, that, they did it, man. That was like, I was blown away. And there's so many other, there's like a dozen details I could get into as to why that show and its production was so amazing, but I won't. But yeah, that's definitely up there as possibly the top individual show that I've ever seen.
Final 2 questions. Kevin, what's got you most excited right now? Is there anything that just wakes you up in the morning, you want to skip out of bed, life is good? Anything on the horizon that's got you excited?
I got to say, I'm not a huge morning person. I don't do the, and you
what gets you out of bed in the afternoon excited?
Oh, okay. I'm not that either. But I feel like if I had to go take a guess, I feel like you might be one of these get up at 5 a.m. kind of guys.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And I totally get that kind of thing. And I've listened to a lot of people talk about their morning routines and their philosophies like that. And I totally get it. That's not for me, but I'm not a afternoon guy into the wee hours either. I try and keep to the daylight more or less. But, man, I'm still excited about music, and I love going to work. Like I said, in a couple days I have this studio session with the Agenda guys, and I'm motivated, and I'll be up and excited for the day, and hopped up on coffee before I even get there, and just ready to go, and that really gets me excited. Exciting sessions, great, hanging out with great people, their excitement, other artists' excitement to get to work on their stuff. I love, like I said earlier, I love the craft of what I do. I love like the job. So that excites me, and I like working because I like to earn my keep, and I love doing what I do. So that gets me excited when I have good projects on the go that I can sink my teeth into. I get excited for that.
Final question. If you could go back in time and you could sit down with your 16-year-old self, so you got cute little Kevin next to you, and if you could offer advice, so with all these years now of experience and lessons learned and mentorship and failures and success, what advice do you whisper to 16-year-old Kevin Dietz?
That's a big question. I would almost, to be honest, I would almost rather um, have a chat with 20-year-old Kevin Dietz than 16-year-old Kevin Dietz. At 16, I was doing 16-year-old stuff. I didn't like get in trouble. I didn't. I was kind of. I didn't. I wouldn't say I was excelling at 16, but I didn't get in trouble. I was just doing average, very average 16-year-old stuff. It was kind of like after high school where I feel like I really got a taste of the adult world and thought to myself, it's like jobs, bills, responsibility. Those things started to pop into my life. Post-secondary education, career stuff. What are you going to do? You're an adult now, so extra responsibilities and extra privileges that come along with that and everything. So
Are you saying you
I would
feel like
almost
your
want to.
20-year-old self would have needed the advice more than the 16-year-old?
Yes. Yeah. I think at 16, I was doing regular 16-year-old stuff, and there wasn't really a problem there. I remember being 20 years old and having a few head scratchers about life, and what advice I would give to my 20-year-old self would be, number one, I would say like dig in a little more on your passion now, like really hit this music thing now. But there's, you always look back and you go, oh, there's ways I could have done it smarter. And again, that's like a whole big conversation, but I would have just imparted the wisdom. If I have any wisdom, it's from experience. And when you're young, you have no experience. So I would have just shared some experience, and those lessons could be, I don't know, that's one of those things you got to sit down and like write out a list. But I would just share some wisdom and like some encouragement, but also maybe some details that I'm having a tough time bringing them to mind, but I'm sure that there's details I could have imparted upon 20-year-old me that I look back and I go, I wish I'd done this earlier. If I knew then what I know now, I would just share some of those things. And
Yeah.
I can't think of specific things that those might be.
Well,
Um,
everything just worked out. That's why. You don't have any gaping flaws where instantly you're like, okay, I should warn myself about this, and this. And it's funny, having interviewed, about 40 people now, um, their answers are all different. And some people say I wouldn't say anything because me saying something might change the course of my
ah,
life, and I wouldn't be here now doing what I'm doing. And I needed those hard times and I had to learn those lessons myself. And sometimes, I've had people that are, very in tune with how they feel, and they just say, little baby Joelle, you are loved, you are worthy. Everyone kind of has the different
yeah,
answers.
yeah.
In your case, there's just no glaring, thing that needed to be corrected. That's all.
No, I just think it's kind of like I would have advice to myself on how I could do it better. But yeah, like things you mentioned as well. I think that um, all of those things are things that could be a good reminder, just a good boost, just a good morale boost.
As we close out, if our listeners enjoyed this conversation. They're interested in learning more. If they maybe want to work with you in any of the capacities that you have your skills and strengths, if they want to reach out and just say hi, where do they find you online? Is there a website? I know that you're on your Instagram. Is that the best place for them to slide into the DMs? Where should they find Kevin Dietz?
Obviously, yeah. In this day and age, as we all are, I'm on the social media. I'm on Instagram. My Instagram is my last name. It's a goofy name, Dietzstagram. So that's the best I could come up with at the time, and stuck with that. I'm on Facebook as Kevin Dietz. I have a business page, I guess you'd call it. Kevin, I think it's just Kevin Dietz Music, or Kevin Dietz producer, engineer, mixer. I don't know. I don't even know what it is. Website is kevindietzmusic.com. And that's my email as well, kevindietzmusic@gmail.com. And I'm reachable on all those mediums. I try to be reachable on all of those mediums, and I'm happy to hear from anyone. And yeah, anyone, please do let me know if you checked out this podcast and anything was good info for you, or any other further questions. I'm happy to. I love talking about this stuff. So
perfect. All right, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. It was great to catch up with you. We haven't had a conversation in a few years, and it was awesome to deep dive. We both had a similar trajectory. I took audio engineering as well. We both went to Metalworks. We both worked at Metalworks, big into music, all that stuff. So it was nice to go through your history, was semi going through my history as well. And
we
brought
recorded
up some
an album
memories
together.
We did. We recorded an album together. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know there's a lot of value there for our listeners. And
awesome.
Thanks, man. Thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to chat and to be seen and heard by your listeners. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, to our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd love to hear from you guys. My goal is to grow this podcast organically, where you're giving me feedback on topics you'd like me to cover and guests you'd like me to interview. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel, and on Twitter at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.